when you read statistics about mental health and stuff like that, like it's not um when you see a statistic on a screen, that's not a human, right? It's very hard to humanize these things. And so when I was having people from, and luckily I'd traveled a little bit at this point, so like when people from Bakersfield to Brooklyn are reaching out to you and like they all have kind of similar things and they're in your age group, like there's something there.
I love it.
That was a pretty shocking thing in my life. And so as I continued to go down that road of helping people who had been down a similar journey like me, I realized that there was something in that piece, and that probably the best way to do it is to write a book.
Writing with authors, I have a treat for you. I met Pat when he was getting going on this book in an initial book coaching call. He followed through, held himself accountable, and I'm proud to say he's got this book published, hitting the top of his category. Now he's getting some extra promotion out on there to really make sure his reach is as far as it could be. So I'm really grateful to have him on the show. Pat, bro, thank you so much for stopping by.
Vincent, we're coming full circle. I really appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, it's this is kind of like the culmination of a journey, right? So you've seen the beginning and the end. So I think we're gonna get really interesting here talking about kind of the difference between that time and now, because we haven't spoken since then.
Yeah, I'm excited. Pat came on. He wasn't a ghostwriting client. He was a book coaching client in the beginning, just as an accountability guy, keep him on track. And again, a part of his book. Now, I'm not sure if it's still in, but it might be a piece that still stuck with me. Um, from the beginning when we first spoke about it. Where did that thing go? Where you talk about the little kid going down the hallway in Virginia,
Yeah.
right? All these
Yeah.
emotions, these feelings, and how at that point it had empowered you, but now you empower it. You're using your story, spreading that long and dear. Let's talk about those early parts that I remember with you in the beginning of your book.
Yeah. What's interesting is the part that you got a hold of, and kind of the model of what the story was always going to be, right? Which is, my book is about, when I was 16 years old, I ended up trying to take my own life, right? And kind of the events that led up to that in my childhood, mental health, all that stuff, right? And then kind of the story of how I had taken an article, published it, it went viral, but I realized that the whole part that was missing was how did I get better? Right. I had published that article when I was 22, 23, about how from that 16-year-old kid lying on a bathroom floor to 23, I was, heading into a Forbes top five's hardest job to get out of college. I was ultra successful. Like my life had completely turned around, with no semblance of that kid. And by the way, that kid, no one would have known that either at that time, right? But all of a sudden, I'm this confident, wonderful, like happy, exuberant human being. How did my life change? And what I realized I had left out of that story is how, right? And so when I sent you that part, which is really the introduction, it was the framing of the book, right? It was the framing of the idea. And that's a little bit of a reach, right? Like the self-help space is super saturated. And how was I going to make that story unique and one into my own? And um, luckily, I got some really good feedback from you early on, and some other people as well, which I encourage everyone to do. Get as much feedback as you can. Go with your heart.
Absolutely.
Go with what you actually think. Like if everybody else isn't always right, right? Like don't take too much influence. Like if there's something that you truly feel you need to hold on to it. But take feedback because there's always ways to improve what you're doing. That being said, getting some early buy-in on what that framing looked like was so huge, so huge.
I love the message there in the beginning, the feedback. It's, of course, everybody wants to give you great advice, but as he said so beautifully, they may not just be qualified. Like, for example, if someone wants me to talk about something science related, right? Like
Yeah,
these topics I
yeah,
don't know, I'm not going to really offer my opinion because I'm not
yeah,
educated there. But as far as writing the book, what sounds good to you may not sound good to everyone else. So that's why I want to highlight that again. That happened to me before. And it's just, we're part of humans. We're blinded
yeah,
by our own light. I want you to hold that book up now. Now that we
yeah,
previewed the
absolutely.
book, let's hold it up so everybody
Yeah,
can see the cover.
look
The
at this.
real confident you. Yeah, yeah.
Look at this.
The
Yeah.
AI crap. It happens to me
Yep,
too.
yep, yep.
All right. So let's talk about the formation from putting this pen to paper. Did you always want to write a book on some kind of topic, or was this just on the fly once you started sharing your story?
Yeah, I've always wanted to write a book.
Yeah.
So when I was like, I was the kid that was in the school newspaper. in college, I went more like the vocal communications route. I was in radio, I had podcasts, I was like promoting the school business and doing all sorts of other stuff. I ended up following a sales career, right, which is basically just radio, but you make a lot more money doing it. So I've always been a communicator by nature, but I've always found writing to be a medium that was very personal. But I always thought that I had something, that there was something there, and being able to take a little bit more time with like how I wanted to communicate and scope out ideas. I'd always thought was interesting, and also I really like challenges. And sitting down and writing a book is not easy, right? It's not, everybody who's listening to this right now knows that it is not an easy process. It's a laborious process. Literally, I know how laborious it would become. But it was something that I've always wanted to do. The topic itself kind of formed over the course of a decade, right? With starting with that article and then really thinking like, okay, when that article came out, like I said, it went relatively viral, and I got flooded with messages, right, of people asking for advice, which is like on so many levels a beautiful and wonderful thing, and like it really opened to my eyes because when you read statistics about mental health and stuff like that, like it's not um, when you see a statistic on a screen that's not a human, right? It's very hard to humanize these things. And so when I was having people from, and luckily I'd traveled a little bit at this point, so like when people from Bakersfield to Brooklyn are reaching out to you and like they all have kind of similar things and they're in your age group, like there's something there.
I love it.
That was a pretty shocking thing in my life. And so as I continued to go down that road of helping people who had been down a similar journey like me, I realized that there was something in that piece, and that probably the best way to do it is to write a book.
Hey, well, I'm so glad you put your story forward, and I love the message you shared there too. Across state lines, you're making a difference, and that's what the beauty of writing a book, even doing a podcast like this, is all about. You're able to impact people you never would have had the chance to otherwise. I want to touch on something you said. Laborious process, right? More labor than you had anticipated. What were some tips or tricks that you used along the way to combat that extra time commitment that you didn't know existed?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. You really do just need to hold yourself accountable, right? You need
Yeah.
to, at the beginning of your week, there needs to be times that I would say, setting medium chunk goals and setting long chunk goals, having some sort of idea and framing around how long you want to write the book, right? So it took me somewhere in the neighborhood of 5.5, 6 months to write this book, right? A lot of it had already been written, so we could probably call it a year to write the book.
Oh yeah.
But let's call it 5.5, 6 months of really dedicated writing. I would never do it in that capacity again because I was doing it 60 hours a week, right? Like I'm done with work, I log off, and
Say
then
that
I'm
again.
writing.
How many hours
Like,
a week did you commit to this in the beginning?
like probably 60 hours a week. Yeah. And that's a soft number at sometimes. Like there
Yeah.
was, as
Yeah.
we were getting towards the end, it's you wake up on Saturday, you go to the gym, you're done at the gym at 6 a.m. You're in front of a laptop until you fall asleep, right?
Yeah.
And it was bringing the laptop in bed on Tuesday night and writing until you fall asleep, and then you wake up and it's next to you, and waking up in the middle of the night and realizing you have something wonderful and typing that down really quickly.
Yeah.
That's the process, right? But what I would say is create dedicated times and create dedicated spaces, right?
Love
So
that.
on the week, I wrote in a different place on the weekends than I did during on the weekdays. During the weekdays, I wrote in kind of my home office kind of setting. On the weekends, I found the greatest coffee shop on planet Earth. It had a great couch. It had great coffee. It was really quiet.
Sounds
That's another
perfect.
thing too. Like stop listening to music while you're doing stuff. That's a whole psychology thing we can get into, but just silence is good. Um, it was quiet. The people were nice and friendly, and I could really laser in and focus in that space, right? Variety in space is good, but not like seeking variety. Once you find your couple of places, it's a wonderful thing. Like you need to get in a groove and a habitual thing of it. So dedicating time in specific spaces and setting the intention of what you're going to do in that time makes a world of difference.
I love that second part, especially the dedicated spaces, and that's going to look different for everybody.
Yeah, of
You're going to
course.
have to get in that habit, that meditative state of just writing, and only you're going to be able to determine where to get there. For example, for me, if I went to a Starbucks to write a book, was one and done for me. There was just too much external
Yeah.
things going on where my power of my mind is strong. But when you're writing, you have to really be all in and be able to
Uh-huh.
control your environment the best you can. Love everything you brought to the table. I love that advice. Now I have to ask, because everyone, I'm going to ask him to come on a mental health break. He'll get on the show to learn a lot more about the mental health side of things. But
Yeah.
since this is a writing show, you got the first book out of the way. You got it done. Is there going to be a second book, whether it's a sequel or just another publication sometime in your
Yeah.
future?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I loved it too much. I enjoyed the process too much. If this book happened to sell 2 copies, which it hasn't, thank God, but like if only 2 people bought this book, I would write another one. Because it was I like the journey, man. The journey is really fun. And there is nothing like having this completed thing sitting next to you and
Holding
you're
it in your hand, man.
yeah, like
Absolutely.
and the moment it came in the mail, like the book came in the mail and I sat down and I looked at it and you've got your name on the cover and all that good stuff. It's such a culmination of things. And that's a beautiful moment, but that is so much less of a beautiful moment than when you're sitting in the coffee shop and you have the idea of
Mhm.
like what the thing is. Like
I
the process and the journey is so much more fun than the selling of the book. Like the hill that you're climbing is so much better than the mountaintop. Trust me. Like there will be struggles. It is laborious to write a book. It is a labor of love. Like it is a
yes.
really enjoyable experience. Um, some difficult things should be enjoyable. This is one of those things. If you're not finding that you're not enjoying a book, writing a book, I mean, my suggestion would be take the book in a different direction in a way that you enjoy writing it, because your readers are probably going to more likely enjoy something that you enjoyed writing. Um, and yeah, I'm going to write another book. I've got a myriad of ideas. I'm not name dropping any ideas right now, but I think I know the direction I'm going to go next.
Hey, well, you have to hit me up. We'll get you back on
Yeah.
the show. And as you mentioned, that process, it's no secret. It's what I do for a living. I start podcasts for people and I write books for people and I coach books. I love seeing the initial idea. And now I get to see the culmination of this, even
Yeah.
at a smaller capacity, like I was with Pat. He made an impression on me. We talked about it then. I said, let me know when the
Yeah.
book's done. We'll bring you on the show a little bit. So everyone, be sure to show him some love online. I'm about to ask him right now where we can find the book and where we can find you.
Yeah. So the best place you can find the book is on Amazon. Just search The Real Confident You. It'll come up quick. The SEO terms are good, so you'll find it. And then the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. You can find me at LinkedIn/PatrickBro, or you can find me on Instagram at PatBro, PATBROE. That is the best last name on earth, and I wish I could buy it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Thanks again for your time coming on the show. Everyone, I hope we added a new book to your queue, or if not, we added some great tips because he gave golden nuggets throughout the show. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more writing with authors, interviews, and all the latest in my world. That's right here, Vincent A. Lanci. This episode is brought to you by Coming Alive Podcast Production, your one-stop shop for podcasting. Visit them at comingalivepodcastproduction.com. And with that, we are signing off. We found out before the show, both in Tampa,
Yeah.
Tampa
So
Bay
coffee's in the
area.
future, folks. Coffee is in the
Yeah,
future.
yeah, I'm right over the bridge here in St. Petersburg. For everyone that's not in the area, Florida is getting filled up quick, but we're
Uh-huh.
happy to add a great person here like Pat. Pat, thanks again for your time, man.
Thank you so much for having me.